If only they knew. The hub for young business minds.
Hello, Ted. Yeah, my name's Chris Caffrey. I'm the founder of Legacy Club and Access Global. Legacy Club is an entrepreneurs community for startups, scale-ups, to put them in a room together and create some magic. And Access Global is a luxury lifestyle and concierge and travel business.
Brilliant. And like I said, off camera, I'm like looking forward to diving into your story and then connecting it more in the future. But before we dive into your story now, who were you before the person we see today? Like, was you interested in business before? Or give us a little bit of a brief of your story, if you don't mind.
I was never ever, well, in my mind, I was never going to be an entrepreneur. I don't really like the word entrepreneur. Yeah. For me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's kind of a thing as opposed to a job or a person. I was always quite average at school. I just did average grades, average stuff. And I just really enjoyed being a young man. So for me, I was always going to be an employee. I was never going to be an employer. It was only really as I got into later life that I really started getting an eye for some interesting businesses. I really love the FMCG stuff. I love consumer goods. I love brands. And it was more that I had a real passion for coffee as I got into sort of my late 20s. And right. I thought actually that there's incredible margins in coffee. And, it's one thing to have a coffee shop, but there's so many interesting things around the coffee industry that I loved. So I had a small coffee business. So that for me was my first foray into working for myself. But it was just tough. It completely fell on its face. It failed. But I started working for private members clubs in London, specifically one that was looking after entrepreneurs. And I absolutely loved it. I was just looking around at all these incredibly talented people, this country's got some amazing talent. We've got some brilliant businesses. How do we connect them better? How do we put them in a room together and connect them as a community? And for me, I never once dreamed that I'd be in this position now where I am, where I'm very fortunate to have almost 400 members and varying levels of specialities in terms of what businesses they're in. They're in food and drink, they're in tech, they're in fashion, finance. It's absolutely so varied, but the beauty is I get to learn from them every single day about how to be better at business. I still don't know what I'm doing, Ted, being very honest with you, but that's the beauty of a startup. Most of us are winging it.
No, that's it. And before we get into that element, because I think that's very important about most people being in a successful position and still perhaps not really understanding how they did it or what they're doing. I think that's a really important point. Before we get onto that, am I right in saying you grew up in Camden? Is that right?
Yeah. I've spent 30 years of my life. I grew up in Camden. It was the best upbringing I could have asked for, given my circumstances and where I'm from, and a single parent family. It was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. I got a huge amount of friends. I got to do a lot of stuff. I had a lot of freedom, and it taught me a lot.
Yeah, I heard you say on another podcast that I believe this was the exact quote. You had no choice but to form allegiances if you wanted to be someone. And I think that's, if that is the quote that you said, I think that's really, really quite strange, because when you think of what you're doing now, that phrase is almost like exactly what you're doing now. If you want to be someone, it's important to be connected. So how much do you think growing up in Camden sort of influenced the person you are and this element of being connected and striving for better?
The allegiance is to be someone. It wasn't to be someone as in a face or a name or someone well known. It was to actually get by in life, because you could sit behind your front door and not go out and never be seen. And that's I feel that that's where you would end up if you start off like that. I was always outgoing. I mean, to be fair, I wasn't always outgoing. I was outgoing when I got to my mid-teens. But it was until that I was fairly quiet, timid young man. I love boxing, I love football, and I just had a small group of mates. But as I got to that point where I thought, you know what, it's a big world out there. I'm fortunate enough to have a big group of friends that all looked out for each other, and I think that was really important. It made us go and spread our wings. We didn't just sit on our doorstep. We went to it felt like miles away, but we'd go to South London, we'd go to West London, and eventually you'd go to Newcastle or go to Liverpool. But the point is that you surround yourself with lots of people. You kind of nurture the relationships as you go through life, and it does put you in a great position, particularly now where, you know, everything I do is about a black book. It's about who I know. It's about contacts. It's about context. It's about being able to open doors for people. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was a recluse, you know, with no friends. And that upbringing allowed me to be an outgoing person.
And like I said, we'll definitely get onto that element and that power of networking. One thing before we do, you said you had experience in the world of private memberships and that space. How important do you think that was for you in terms of allowing you to do what you do today? And for people listening, how important is it to work in the world that you want to be an entrepreneur in? So I've had people on here that own media groups and they become a runner for BBC and they get to learn all the behind the scenes, how it all works. And then they have the power to start their own media group afterwards. So how important is it to be in the space?
Well, I think first to your first question, which is being around the members clubs, that was 100% the impetus for me to do what I do today, particularly the niche that we're looking at, which is supporting entrepreneurs. You know, you can open a members club anywhere in London and just, you know, it's a members club. It's social. It does what it says on the tin. It's meant to just bring people in who spend money and entertain. But my focus was always to create a community without having, you know, a bricks and mortar presence, a ball and chain around my neck, which I'm worrying about how much that's going to cost me every month. You know, you're looking at minimum 30, 40, 50 grand a month in outgoings just to have a venue in London. When actually what nobody had done is create the community first. So I reverse engineered it. You know, I've created a community, and one day if I decide to open a club, I've already got the members. You know, what my experience about being around clubs, and these are some of the most prestigious and best clubs in London, were that there was a lack of real connecting for the people. There was a lack of knowing who's in your space, who you're here to meet. People were coming into the clubs where they were just coming in with their guests to have their meetings, to do their work and go home. Mm-hmm. Now, having a hospitality background working in hotels and members clubs, I know that 50% of any members club or hospitality business is their revenue comes from food and drink. It has to come from the people that are in that building. So effectively, if you're running a club, you need your members in the building every single day full so that they spend every single day. Because if you don't, you're already on the back foot. So I've got a very, very lean business model. I don't have massive overheads of a building in London or anywhere. But nobody had done what we were doing, or what we do is reach out to all these members clubs and go, I know you need people in your clubs. I know you need people spending money, because I know that 50% of your annual turnover will come from food and drink being spent. And if you haven't got your own members in the club, let us bring our members in the club. They'll spend money, and it works. It's a nice relationship that we've got going. But how important is it to be around those ideas and those roles? I don't think it's that important, Ted, to be in the industry necessarily that you're going to go and work in. I think you have to have a passion for it, because I'm a firm believer of that. Successful businesses can be hobbies, pastimes, passions, just hiding in plain sight. You know, you don't have to create a business. A lot of people go out there and go, right, I need to solve a problem. But most of the time they're looking for a fucking problem. Yeah. Well, that's not solving a problem. You're finding a problem that you think that there's a gap in it. There's no passion in that. You're just looking for an in, and actually you're forcing a situation. No one's born an entrepreneur, Ted. No one's born to know how to run a business. This is the stuff you learn on the way. I've made so many mistakes with Legacy Club, but I've rectified them. I acknowledge what they are. It's about surrounding yourself with brilliant people, often people that are better than you, that can do it better than you, and help you. So I don't think it's essential that you've worked in media to then run a media company. You know, I hadn't worked in members clubs for that long, but what I had is a passion for people and to support them.
Yeah, no, I get that. And on that point there as well about your passion, this is a bit of a weird one, but do you think, like, in life, this is so strange, but do you think in life, like, people have a role to play and a purpose that is connected to their passion? So I'm wondering whether your purpose in life and your role as a person in general is perhaps like helping people connect, accommodating, service to others, and it's perhaps your role something to do with that. Like, what's your thoughts on that? I know that sounds a bit weird, but
No, I know what you mean. But everything I do is to add value to our members, right? It's not to make money. You know, we're a very, very lean business model, so we don't need to make tons of money. But I've never started this off to be an overnight millionaire. That's not me. You know, for me, I started this off because one, there was nobody doing it, and actually, we really needed it. Networking has a terrible name. You know, when you look at I can't name them, but when you look at other networking groups out there, they're fucking awful. You go to them, you get a cold cup of coffee, you get a soggy bourbon, you're sitting in some weird ballroom at 6:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. No, that's not networking. That's being forced to be in a situation where you're desperate for business. I get it. There's horses for courses, and that will work for some people. But I think it's essential that we do things that we enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my passion, my enjoyment comes from making sure that A meets B and they have a nice relationship and they do some business together, or A meets B, who's going to introduce them to C. That is where our value is. You know, we don't charge a lot for it, for the membership, but the idea is that they get a lot for it. And every day I wake up and go, well, how are we going to add more value? What event is going to be interesting? And the most important thing, the biggest thing that our members get from what we do is who they can talk to, who they're going to meet, and how they're going to grow their network. And it's not necessarily sales. No one comes in selling. I haven't seen any business cards handed over. And I love that, because people get to know the person behind the business. Mm-hmm. And with a bit of a saying is, leave your business at the door. When you come to an event, leave your company at the door, come in as Ted, the business owner, but leave the company at the door, letting people find out about who you are, what you do. It's why I love golf. You know, you get 4 hours to play a round of golf with 3 other people you may not have met before, or you're networking with. And by the end of that 4 hours, not only do you know if they're going to do business with you, you know their kids' names, their shoe size or whatever, but more importantly, you know if you want to do business with them. And that's a big thing to know, to have that decision. I don't want to do business with that person because they're a dickhead or they're not very nice. Or, you know, it's nice, it's fortunate to be in a position where you can say no to business.
Yeah.
But that's got to be the aim, to be able to work with people you want to work with, not just work with anyone, because there's no value in that.
Yeah, no, I get that. And that's exactly the example I was thinking of. You know, like when you think you know someone based on what they said, and then like a couple of weeks into the working relationship, you're like, oh my God, I was like hoodwinked into working with this guy. It's a nightmare, isn't it? So it's always good to network. But before we get into the nitty gritty of the power of networking and what your club offers, one thing sort of to backtrack a bit, how did you actually, like you said, you've got a streamlined business model, I guess is what you're saying earlier. How did you actually get started with this on a practical level? Like, what was the first steps you took? Because am I right in saying you started it in one of the lockdowns we had?
Yeah, so 2020. Yeah, 2020. I got made redundant. I was working for a top members club in London, and I was head of membership there. I opened the club. And I was responsible, you know, for bringing in a good chunk of their members. And that's where my passion came from, working with these founders. Mm-hmm. Sadly, COVID came along, decimated the businesses, and a lot of people lost their roles, including me. I was like, okay. I was fortunate enough that I didn't need to get a job the next day. I had some time to think. And actually, Legacy Club had been buzzing around in my head because I was in this venue, this club, and I was working there going, but he doesn't know who she is and she doesn't know who he is. What are they even here for? They could join any club in London, but they've chose this one specifically because it's for entrepreneurs, but nobody knows who anyone is. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. And it just dawned on me, you don't need the building. You need to build the community. You need to build the connections for people. And it sounds like bullshit, Ted, but it was one of those 4 o'clock in the morning, sat up in bed. I've got it. I've got a fucking idea. This could work. I said it to my wife, and it was pretty much, shut up, go back to sleep. So I couldn't at that point. And it sounds like nonsense, but I went downstairs, got the laptop out, put a rough draft of what is now Legacy Club together over the next sort of 3 days. And it's like, actually, this could work. In my head, this could work, but it's easy to convince yourself, you know, of something. And that's when people are too close to the businesses. But what is now my advisory panel, I went out to these guys and girls who I really admired and looked up to, as really successful business owners. And I said, look, I've got an idea, a proposition. What do you think of it? And all of them said, this is a great idea in theory, because one, nobody's done it. Two, it has some real practical value. There is some real value in what you're trying to achieve, but actually you're going to have to run it through lockdown when all your events are going to be online. I'm like, fine, that makes us a very lean model. Let's see what the interest is like. And I think we had like 60 members sign up for free, all free stuff for the first few, like 4 months or something, at the end of 2020, with a view to, look, we're going to go live in January 21. Who's going to actually start paying for this now? And hopefully when we come out of lockdown, we'll go into real life events. And thankfully, most of them did. And it snowballed from there. But yeah, that's where it came from. It was one of those light bulb moments where actually nobody's done this. Are we solving a problem? Yeah, potentially solving a problem. It's a bit of a luxury to have this outlet of networking. So it's not necessarily problem solving. I'm just making what's pretty much a terrible industry better.
Do you think then, like, because like you said, you went through all those different stages, all those different things in your life. Do you think that in life, certain things just take time? Like for you to be able to have that moment at 4 a.m. where you wake up and you're like, oh my God, light bulb moment, I've got it. Do you think that process takes time? Because I know for me, like the amount of stuff I've done, and like after a year, you're like, that felt like a waste of time. Then a few months later, because of that year that you think you've wasted, another opportunity then pops up, which takes you further down the road. So yeah, a bit of another weird one. But do you think things just take time? Do you think there's an element of destiny? What's your thoughts on that whole process?
I don't believe in fate and things like that. I think hard work brings you closer to luck. You know, that's in my opinion. You'll get closer to luck when you do a bit of hard work. No, I don't waste my time on anything. I think if anything that doesn't work, it's a learning curve, you know, and I think it's really important for you to be agile and have the ability to go, you know what, I'm noticing that hasn't worked. Let's not spend any more money on that. Almost like brush it aside, maybe come back to that later. And when we're a bit bigger, the stuff that we had planned at the very beginning, I think back now thinking, fucking hell, what were you thinking? Like, but a legacy club was originally, it was always going to be what it is. But in terms of business model and how we were going to charge, is we were going to charge people, give people credits for introductions. It was like you could buy 100 introductions for X amount of money. And once they're gone, you then need to buy some more. And I thought, that's going to be so hard to manage. In theory, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah. But actually, the value is in have as many introductions as you want. You know, this is the community. Why am I holding it back? Just pay a monthly fee and, you know, you can speak to everyone. Yeah. It just felt restrictive. And I had grand plans to launch in Germany and in Ireland last year. I just don't have enough boots on the ground and time in my day to make that happen. So it's that being that agility to go, forget that. You might have spent a few months planning that and making some noise about it, but actually look a little bit closer to home, be a bit more sensible. Don't start running before you can walk.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's something I need to take on myself as well. But going back, you mentioned obviously the power of building a community first and being able to leverage your connections, which is one of the factors that helped you sort of get started. So yeah, let's just reiterate that, if you don't mind. How important is it, especially for young people? My audience is made up of mostly young people interested in business and self-development. So how important is it to build a network as early on as possible? And yeah, what are some of the possibilities that come from having a network? Because you've mentioned some already, haven't you?
Yeah, it's absolutely everything. A network is everything. I don't buy into that nonsense about your network is your net worth and all these cliches and, you know, surrounding yourself with all these just 5 people because you're going to be the sum of them. That's all lovely sound bites, and it's just not realistic. You know, I might have 70 conversations with 70 different people in 1 week, but I value every single one of them because I don't go into those connections and those relationships with what can I get out of this? It's mutually beneficial. Let's start a relationship. I'll go and have a pint with someone. I'll go and have a coffee with people. I'll go and have lunch with people because I feel that if I give them my time and what I can help them with, then I'll get it back. You know, so much without them knowing, without them feeling that I'm asking for anything. And selfishly, I'm probably the person within Legacy Club that gets the most out of it. And that's because I'm surrounded by, nearly 400 members on a daily basis that I can lean on. I could lean into you, Ted, and say, by the way, could you help me with this? So you can come to me and say, can I help you with that? I've got 400 people that I can ask, plus my advisory board, plus my extended network. And that's where I feel we have a lot of value compared to other people. There are other people doing what we do, but they seem to be very disconnected with their members. I will go around people's houses. I'll sort out arrangements for their kids. If their kids want to go and see a show that they can't get tickets on, I'll go out of my way to try and make that happen, because it's a value add. It's not something that we do as a business, but it's a value add to them. That's important to me. So yeah, 100% a community is incredible. And it's not, if you look up the word community, it means like-minded. It means people in your close proximity that have similar interests. Not necessarily. So that's just what the Oxford Dictionary put it as. A community is a load of people that really want to support and be around each other and help. That for me is where Legacy Club is better than anyone, hands down, because it's genuine. It's not for sale. We don't sell anything. We don't push anything on people. All of our partnerships are based on relationships that we've had for a long time, and we know are valuable. So for me, yeah, community is absolutely everything.
And you mentioned it there, so we may as well explain it, because I was like looking at the benefits of joining the Legacy Club, and it is honestly unreal. So if you don't mind explaining some of the benefits, because it obviously like you said, networking is so important. You get that network, but you also get so much more, don't you? It's quite unbelievable, actually.
Yeah, 100%. So if let's just say you've got two business owners who are in very, very different industries. You've got one that makes Apple straps, and you've got, I don't know, one just going for stuff that's in my kitchen, one that makes girls' hairbrushes, right? They're two different industries, very, very different businesses. Those people ordinarily, in an ordinary world, wouldn't be sat at the same table discussing the same matters. Well, really, they should be, because the guy making the Apple straps and the guy making, or the lady making the brushes, whoever it is, these are just a byproduct of what they do. Their business is their business. This isn't their business. Their business is their business. And to make sense of that, it means that they're going to need to know how to do finance. They're going to need to know how to do brand, PR, marketing, access new markets, get investment. And all those things are quite uniform across the businesses. Need to know how to do them. This is just your byproduct. So if I can sit there with someone that's making brushes and say, how do you do your accounts? How do you do your PR? How do you do your marketing? What challenges have you overcome? And they can help me, then I'll make less mistakes, or I can pass that information on to them. Why shouldn't we be able to share talent, share skills? And there's too many people that believe that the business starts and ends with them. It's not. It's about how successful you can make yourself by being around other people. Now, there's a couple of other institutions out there, well, not even institutions, a couple of other clubs out there that say, well, we just want the top 1% as our members. We just want those billionaires and millionaires in the room. Well, I can tell you for one thing for certain, Ted, is they're not going to teach each other anything, are they? Yeah. It's just going to be who's got the best business card, who's got the biggest, and who's got the best.
Yeah.
I want to put the person with 100 grand turnover in the room with someone that's doing 100 million pound turnover, because that lift will go both ways. 100 million pound man or lady is going to come down at some point, and 100 grand person is going to go up at some point. And if you not giving anyone the time of day, don't forget who you're going to see on the way up and the way down.
Yeah,
you should be sharing what you know with everybody. And I'm not talking about not signing NDAs and giving away secrets of your business, but if you've got something that you can help someone with, it doesn't cost money to do good.
No, I completely agree with that. And I guess there's like you said there, you sort of hinted it, like that personal boost of, say, for example, someone like me is really young, 24, just starting off in the business world, barely even sort of touch the surface, touch the sides of it all. For me, joining a club like that, like you said, everything there. And I'd also learn so much from a personal self-development perspective as well, because I've learned it already being around certain people that are doing well. One of the things I've realized is quiet people sometimes and quite a lot of the times get left behind, because if they're not sort of speaking their mind and putting themselves into positions where they'll be front of mind, I feel like sometimes it's quite easy to get left behind. So being around people that are doing great things is quite easy to sort of boost yourself up. So what's your thoughts on that phrase, quiet people get left behind?
No, there is a lot of truth to that, because I even see it within our membership, when we're doing events where there's quite a lot of people. We do small sort of 12, 15 person events, and we'll do 50, 60 person events, but it's those larger events where the maybe more timid or quieter people melt into the background a bit. But it's my job, as community leader, to then go and say to that person, look, I think you should definitely have a chat with this person, and just bring them out. But I've seen that transition. I've seen them go through the motions to become actually quite important people in the community, from being quite quiet and in the background. But that's a responsibility on me, because I can't change people. You are who you are. It's my job to make sure that the event is as welcoming or as engaging as you want it to be. Ultimately, I can't change you and make you more outgoing, but I want to make you comfortable in our surroundings and not feel intimidated by anyone. And going back to your question about the partners, and it goes back to my point about no one's born an entrepreneur, no one's born a successful one, certainly. And how do you get from startup to scale up? How do you navigate that wilderness if you've never done it before? It's easy to replicate success, or quite easy, but if you've never done it before, you don't know what the next challenge is going to be. So with our partners, we have them in place, such as legal, tech, finance, well-being, mental health. We have these partners in place so that you can dip into them as a toolbox and go, actually, Bill, I need to get some legal advice. I'm going for a funding round. I need you to help negotiate my term sheets. No problem. We'll sort that out for you, Ted. It's going to cost you a lot less. You'll get an hour of my time for free. And they're a trusted supplier. They're best in their business. And you haven't got to go searching Google for someone that's going to pull your pants down. This is a real community, and that's where it begins and that's where it ends, is the people there are there to help. And that's what the partners are there for as well.
And sort of talking, I guess it's related to the partners and the people you bring in. You've had some amazing names as well. The other day I saw one of my idols, Barry Hearn. I think that was one of your first in-person events, right? And you've got Johnny Nelson coming up. You've had, I believe, Tony Truman, is it? And you've had so many great names. Like what's like is on that point, how do you not get those names as in like book them, but like, has it been your effort put into networking that has allowed you to connect with these people and allow you to bring them in at sort of a moment's notice and say, look, come and join me and sort of be here for me? I guess that's all down to networking, right? And then also tied onto that, what have you learned from being around those sort of people?
So in terms of the guests, it was always, the bigger the name, the better. But actually, it dawned on me that I was, after about the third or fourth guest, I realised I was getting guests in that I was interested in, and it felt a little bit selfish. Barry was my first guest, but I know he's got a great story, and I know he's a great speaker, and I've worked with Matchroom for a number of years, and so for me it was an easy win. We made a nice donation to his foundation to get him to come and do it. We were going to do it online at first, and Barry just turned around and said, "Nah, let's just do it in person." I'm like, great. Barry Hearn to kick stuff off, and it was brilliant. It was a packed room, nice lunch in Mayfair, and it was just the honesty, because we don't invoke sort of Chatham House rules or anything like that, but it was very honest. It was about his journey, and ultimately, he is the face, or was the face of Matchroom, but he was an entrepreneur. He's a business owner. Just because he was running this huge beast, it doesn't mean he didn't start at the bottom. And I had the same conversation when we interviewed DJ Fat Tony. So Fat Tony, he's incredible. But for me, it was like, I was getting questions to say, well, he's not an entrepreneur. What's it got to do with business? Well, nobody said it always has to do with business, but let me correct you on that. Tony owns his own company, which is a clothing brand. He also has the best comeback story I've ever heard, from the depths of ridiculous drug abuse to pulling his own teeth out, to being the lowest of the low for his own self-esteem. He's now one of the most successful DJs in the world. Now, if that doesn't tell you about strength, character, mental health, and mental well-being, you find me someone else that's got a better story than that from comebacks.
Yeah.
And obviously Tony Truman, he's a serial entrepreneur. He's got like 15 businesses in Ibiza and London and work across the world, and he's just got a great story to tell. But everything we do has a social element attached to it. You won't find us in a boring, stale event. We're doing, a really dry talk. It's always entertaining. It's always some value, and that's what we bang on about: is create a load of value for people. They go away, and it's not necessarily about the Tony Truman or the Levi Roots talking. That's great. That's really interesting and fun. But who's in this room? Yeah. That's who I want to meet, and that's where we're successful.
No, I love that, and I've also done that myself. Like, I've had boxers on here, and obviously it's a show for young entrepreneurs, and I was trying to show that correlation between, like you said, sort of boxers, DJs. They are technically sort of entrepreneurs because they'll have their own businesses. They'll have to look after sponsors and all stuff like that. So no, I completely get that. Last few things, if you don't mind. What have you learned from this venture of yours? So starting this, networking with other people. Have you learned anything from the process or the people involved in it, or what have you learned from it?
Well, apart from the obvious business stuff, which is everything. I didn't know anything when I started, and I still don't know half as much as I need to know. But what it's allowed me to do is to set up a second business, which is Access, which I always wanted to do as a secondary or as a business, because I've got 20 years in the travel industry as my career. So it was always obvious that I was going to do that and have that as a second business. But setting up Legacy Club has given me the education to set up Access differently, a bit more thought out, a bit more aware of what I need to do, rather than just going, I've incorporated a company, let's see if we can make some money. This is a lot more measured. But that the business stuff, I've learned a ton of stuff, and I've still got a long way to go. But what have I learned about myself is that we're all human, we'll all make mistakes, but I absolutely love what I do, Ted. And there's all cliches about you don't have to work a day in your life. Trust me, you do. We work every single day. We start our own businesses with the magical idea that we're going to have lots of money and lots of time, and really you don't get either of that. You get no time, you get no money. Well, the money will come, but for me, I've learned I'm resilient. I've learned that I've just love being around people, and I think if you harness the stuff that you're good at, try and work on the stuff that you're not good at, such as admin, such as finance, and those stuff that nobody likes doing, which is why we've got brilliant partners to help us with that. I'm more resilient than I thought I was, but actually you really need to look after yourself as well, because when you do this, whether it's on your own or with partners or with co-founders, it's still so tough. You'll know that yourself, Ted. It's tough on your own. It's tough with a big company, but it's really mentally draining as well. I wouldn't change it. If I go back to full-time employment, Ted, it's because this is falling on its face and I just can't do it anymore.
That's before, sort of, you touched on it a little bit earlier, before we get into the final thing of what you're up to next, because obviously I appreciate the time as well.
That's okay.
Can we quickly fly through a quick fire round? So far it hasn't been quick fire at all, so don't worry if your answers aren't quick fire. But the first question, what would be your one piece of advice for young entrepreneurs?
Do it whilst you're young enough, and make the mistakes early, because when you get to the age of 40 plus, which I am, your risks are much higher if you go and take that leap later in life. Do it whilst you're young enough to make mistakes.
Love that. And your favorite creators or entrepreneurs? I guess for you, you've got the privilege of being around so many great people. So is there anyone that for you at the moment is doing something great?
We've got some incredible ones. I'm a massive fan of people like Will You Financial, Craig Copeland, and people like that who've got this incredible financial institution, which isn't necessarily a sexy industry to be in, but the things that they've done in just 5 years, the clients that they've won, I'm lucky to call them friends and partners, but I've got so much admiration for people like that. But from a creator's perspective, at the moment, I've got a lot of time for people like Joe Maruzzi from Please Cakes, and Kane and Keelan. Kane Dow, I just look at his Ask Mummy and Daddy Confectionery. I watch his branding all the time. The stuff that he's doing, it's keeping it always looks good. It always looks fresh, and it's it's just like he's pumping it out, just constantly
Yeah.
pumping out this stuff. And I'm like, this is, so I've got lots of admiration for anyone that's in that consumer goods space as well.
Is there anyone you'd like to thank as well, or shout out in this moment? Obviously, that they were like your favorite creators, but is there anyone that's been pivotal in either making you who you are today or helping you in your journey?
Well, every single one of my members and partners, to be fair, they you know, each one of them have backed me, if just by paying for their membership is one thing, but also they say, how can they help? How can they be more involved? But there was this one guy at the very beginning, he's on my advisory board, a guy called James Chiffey. He runs a not-for-profit company called Beyond the White Line. And they are for sportsmen and women coming out of the game and what they do after, you know, so the amount of people that don't make it through football academies, for example, and the suicide rates in former cricketers and rugby players that get divorced. His not-for-profit was there to support that function, which really isn't there. But he was the person that I'd speak to for 2-3 hours a day when I was building Legacy Club at the very beginning. He'd give me some fucking brutal advice that I'd have to take on the chin, because he's a smart man. You know, he now works for Swansea Football Club. They took him on to run their player welfare stuff. But yeah, he's been incredible for me. He's been an inspiration, but he's also massively pushed me as well.
Yeah. And talking of advice, my show is obviously called If Only They Knew. Is there something that you wish you knew at an earlier stage in your life or your business career?
Yeah, that business isn't that scary. It's not that if your business doesn't work, you're going to lose your house, your family, and everything. You know, there is a big stigma attached to businesses failing. I'm not saying it's okay to go out and be blasé about your business and let it fail, but I wish I'd started a long time ago, Ted, because 42 is not it's not old necessarily, but I'm in that massive risk category with a home, a mortgage, 2 children, a wife. So if it doesn't work out, I've got a lot more to lose. So I wish I'd done this years ago. Yeah. But then I didn't have the experience years ago, Ted. I didn't know what I know years ago. I hadn't been working in these clubs and working around entrepreneurs. It was just a fancy word that Del Boy used, you know, when I was growing up. So that would be the one thing is mate, take the risk. The risk is worth it.
Last couple then as well. So what's your meaning of life? And tied in with that, do you want a legacy? Have you thought about what legacy you want to leave behind, or have you not really thought about
that? The meaning of life for me is just my family now. Everything I do is for my family. My wife's been a massive support for me and for Legacy Club in the darker times when I'd lost my job, and we spent 6 to 9 months not taking any money from anyone, but just creating a brand which people could buy into at some point. And she backed me on every step of the way, financially, mentally, to make it happen. So yeah, I do everything now is for them. But the legacy I want to leave, I ask my members this all the time. Through our own podcast, we ask them, it's called Legacy Club. What do you want to be remembered for? And for me, it's to have made a difference to people's businesses. And that's by virtue of who I can introduce them to, who they've met through our business. Craig, from the guy I'm talking about from Will You Financial, he was our sponsor at our last event with Daniel Priestley. And he did a little talk at the beginning. And he put an image up on the screen, a still that said that since he's been a member, he now works with 20 of our members.
Wow.
That's, it's worth a lot of money to him, but that's worth so much more to me to know how much value he's got out of it, that he now works with 20 of our members who are paying him in some form for some product that he has. That just shows you the power of what we're doing. And I haven't even, just looked at what that costs, what that is in money. How much is that worth to? How much money is being traded within our club? I'm sure it's millions, but that's not a tick box for me. It's how much is what value you're getting. If you're still paying every month, then you must be some value to you. You're enjoying meeting the people that you're meeting. And long may it continue. We'll see if I'd like to get up to Manchester and launch a Legacy Club up there if I can. I just need a bit of support and some partners. So if anyone's out there in Manchester wants to get involved, let me know.
I love that. I'm genuinely so excited for what's next for you. It sounds like a lot's going on. On that then, final point, what is next for you? What's sort of in your pipeline for the rest of the year?
Access. So AXS,
Yeah.
Access, our concierge and travel business as it's gone off the hook since the beginning of the month. It's been bananas, which is great. I always knew that it would be a bigger revenue model than Legacy Club, but it comes with its own risks. But it's, for me now, I really need to grow that side of the business as well, get more partnerships, more concierge partnerships. Yeah, just really see where it goes. And fingers crossed, Ted, you know, between me and you and the millions of listeners, is we might have a physical building at some point in the future.
Wow.
I mean, that's the dream.
Yeah. No, that is really exciting. Like I said, I'm genuinely excited for it. So let's see what happens. The last thing, where's the best place for people to find out more, get involved with what you're doing, join the club, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, you can find a lot of information on our website, legacyclub.co.uk, or go to our LinkedIn page, which we're really prominent on, or contact me directly through email or through the website.
Brilliant. Like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on.